Rob is a fellow of the British Blockchain Association, been with the association for several years. I remember he published his first paper in 2018, 2019. He presented at our first ISC in London, 2019. And since then, Rob has published several papers. He's extensively written on the topic of post-quantum blockchains, and a very, very important area. And a lot of you would have heard about post-quantum cryptography, post-quantum blockchains recently in the last 2 years. But Rob was writing papers when probably nobody had even heard about it or was talking about it. And you will find these papers open access in the Journal of the British Blockchain Association, along with the infographics, which will help you understand what this means, the post-quantum blockchain. And even recently, Rob has written a paper, I think it was sometime last year, on Bitcoin and Ethereum post-quantum strategies, what they look like, how institutions can migrate to post-quantum blockchains. And this is a fascinating area, very important area. And in fact, it's a focus of national strategies. We have national quantum strategy in the UK, and also elsewhere, the countries are now working. And this is a very, very important topic. So I know it's very difficult to cover this in 10 to 12 minutes, but we have asked Rob to give us an overview, particularly the most recent paper that he's published on the Bitcoin and Ethereum post-quantum strategies, and what these applications will look like. And most importantly, what the governments and enterprises can do now to prepare, and the next steps they can take. So thank you very much, Rob. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Can everybody hear me well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'll give an overview just to talk. Don't have any slides over the research. I did a paper on post-quantum cryptography, which is cryptography that we would use to protect ourselves against quantum computers. And I work at IBM, and IBM is one of the leading developers of quantum computers. And so I have an opportunity to see firsthand what the actual threat is. And I would say that it's a moving target. A lot of the government agencies within the US had projected that a threat would be appearing on the horizon around 2030 to 2035. But that threat has to be revised in that most of the leading quantum computing developers like Microsoft, Google, and IBM, and IonQ, and others are now saying 2029 is when a quantum computer would be strong enough to be able to break the wallet cryptography that we use for cryptocurrencies. In particular, we're talking about Ethereum, we're talking about Solana, just as an example, and Bitcoin. And so the paper was about what does it take to migrate safely and in time to beat the clock in terms of the threat itself. And the results were not, I would say, not positive. Sometimes we have to do research that you would call negative research, meaning that there's no silver lining per se, other than preparation and knowledge of what needs to be done, what is the threat, how can we handle this before it becomes a crisis. So getting into the results of my paper, if you look at the blockchain and how it works, and if you, I don't know how many have been involved in the blockchain early on, but it used to be like I was in the early 2015, 16 or so, transacting on the blockchain. Sometimes you would make a transaction, and depending on how heavy the network was, you may not see a transaction until the next day, because of the way the blockchain works. There's confirmations that are required, and it depends on how many people are on the blockchain network. Well, in my research, in order to migrate to post-quantum cryptography to protect against quantum computing, I have come up with the term, it would be a defensive downgrade. But I want to talk a little bit very quickly about a quantum computer. What it does, it's a revolutionary type of computing system. It's a paradigm change. The computers that we have now are called classical computers. These computers we've never seen anything like it before in terms of its computational ability. So it breaks a lot of assumptions that we've made over the years. They're no longer valid. So the results are that if we were to migrate to post-quantum cryptography, which would be necessary to protect against the quantum computer, we would see a 50% capacity loss. As I said earlier, in the early years of Bitcoin, blockchain, and Ethereum, it would take sometimes overnight to get a transaction through and confirmed. But that has changed drastically because of upgrades to the networks, the blockchain networks. And so it's much, much faster. But migrating to post-quantum cryptography, which is something very different from what we've ever used, it's much, much cumbersome, much more larger. It takes much more time to transact. So we're looking at a 50% capacity loss. And if you look at how, you're taxed on the, what I mean by tax is the fees, the fees would go up 2 to 3 times. So this is what we call a defensive downgrade. And we call it a defensive downgrade because even when the changes to make the blockchains faster, it was met with friction, disagreement, and it took years to accomplish. And that was a beneficial change. It made everything faster. It made the transactions cheaper. But now we're talking about a migration. It would be the opposite. It's an immediate downgrade. You're going to, lose capacity. The fees will go up. And it's a very different type of problem. It leaves the realm of being a technical problem and goes into the realm of governance. If you look at blockchains, what was attractive about blockchains was that it was decentralized. You had no central authority. It was run automatically through programs. And so because of that, we're facing an issue, a threat that requires coordinated activity to take action. And if you look at the ecosystem that we have today, we have coin exchanges, we have developers, we have miners, but in the case of Ethereum and Solana, you have validators, but they're like miners, they're very similar, but you have the users. So it's a whole ecosystem that would have to agree to make any change, and to get everyone to agree on a negative change, immediately negative. And I don't say it's all negative, but we're talking about the potential survival of the blockchain as we know it. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes years, even for positive changes. But if I tell you what I just told you, and to try to get the whole ecosystem to agree to move, then that gives you a sense of what we face. So anyway, the threat, it's getting closer and closer. It's coming faster and faster than most people anticipated. And so the issue is when you think about blockchains and you think about your wallets, like where you hold your cryptocurrency, that signature, when you send cryptocurrency or receive cryptocurrency, you have an address. And what's vulnerable is that address that you have. A quantum computer can take that public key address and reverse engineer it and develop a secret key, meaning they can spend whatever you have in your account, whatever you have, and that's the threat. So the threat varies a little bit in that Bitcoin has made some upgrades that protects it more than it did in the past. So we're looking at 25% of the Bitcoin supply that would be vulnerable right now. 65% of the supply of Ethereum would be vulnerable because Ethereum uses public keys all of the time and almost every time. So they're more vulnerable. And the most vulnerable is Solana, which is used as just public key all of the time. So we're talking about potentially trillions of dollars at risk. And if we don't get some sort of plan in place, a credible plan in place, what could happen is, unfortunately, once a quantum computer is detected, potentially that there's been a hack by a quantum computer, then you're going to see panic. You're going to see people wanting to withdraw, sell as soon as possible, and then you're talking about cascading failure. You're not going to be able to move anything. The prices, the value is going to drop suddenly, and so this is really a test of decentralized blockchains as we know it. I unfortunately, I wish it was more positive news. I'm a big supporter of the philosophy and how it works, but I report, what I find and the findings. I've been talking about this actually since 2017 and 16, and most people who didn't believe that quantum computers were real, they thought it was a Star Trek fantasy. But now I think the story is changing. So I don't have any great news on this, so I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Rob. I think this is a fascinating area, and one of the questions that people ask is, we know that, right? So if you have a wallet that has spent a crypto, means you have your public keys are now exposed, because when you sign a transaction and now your public keys are exposed, and as you said, the quantum computer can reverse that public key and can find your private key or seed. But there are wallets that have never spent their crypto, so their public key is not exposed. So how secure are those wallets when we are looking at the bigger picture of this transition? And the second question related to that is, would it be two parallel systems then, that some people will choose to migrate to whatever the new post-quantum structure will look like, and some people
Yeah.
won't migrate, and we will have two parallel systems then?
Well, that's what I propose, a parallel system. Actually, we can design better to prepare for these algorithms. On the other hand, there is opportunity for the algorithms to become more efficient. They're just not efficient. So for those theoretic cryptographers who develop this, they don't really, operate in the operational world, right? They don't necessarily operate there. But let's see. So the blockchain is open by nature. This is another attractive feature, that the transactions are public. So any kind of transaction that you have on a blockchain would be open to everyone. So in order to get crypto in your wallet, you have to have an address, right? So whether or not somebody sends you crypto or you buy crypto, you have to have an address. And that address has typically been a public key. And so, the other part of this, I used to mine crypto, Bitcoin. And so as I accumulated Bitcoin, money or Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency would be sent to my public key address into my wallet. So everything is visible. So even if you haven't spent any of your crypto, your address would be public, and that is what's at risk, your public key. And especially if you look at Solana and you look at Ethereum. Now, Bitcoin is a bit more safe now because they have an update where they take a hash of that public key. It's not the actual public key. This is why we say 25% of Bitcoin. So we take a hash of that public key. Now that hash is less susceptible to quantum computing attacks. It is these signatures, the public key, the signatures that are susceptible. But again, Ethereum and Solana, they use that public key.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you. I think if anybody got any questions. Oh, Larissa has a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question to Professor Campbell. I do see the threat from quantum computing to cryptocurrency and to blockchain, but what often is kind of not getting discussed, but how the existence of quantum will change just any kind of cybersecurity pattern of any other protected system. For example, whether it will be easier somehow to guess the passwords of any other systems like email addresses or to use any other information, and whether it will make it easier for hackers or for whoever owning a quantum basically to break at other systems that are not blockchain based, because we can see blockchain vulnerability, but what about non-blockchain system? Have your research kind of compared how other systems will be also affected by quantum?
Yes. Well, so we have quantum computing will be able to break any type of encryption that we have today, even what we call post-quantum. Eventually, the computational ability will exceed the ability to defend. Now, but there's something else we have to consider, and that's artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence and quantum computing are merging, right? They're merging. And AI has been around for a while, and it's been limited due primarily to computational capability. I had my first course in 1992. It was interesting, but we just didn't have the compute power to make it interesting enough for me. So, and only recently, in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, the compute power began to increase, and we were able to do more interesting things. Now, with the compute power of a quantum computer put together with AI, we've got a new life form that nobody can predict where it's going to go. AI on its own, if you think about, there's something called Anthropic had Mythos. This is, I don't know if you heard, in the U.S., the U.S. government considered it a national security threat and forced Anthropic to shut it down. Well, that's temporary, right? I mean, you can't, technology is going to go where it's going to go, whether, one country develops or another, it will continue to develop. Now, that's without combining the compute power of quantum computer, right? So if you think about Mythos, it can find vulnerabilities in systems that have never been discovered before, create a weaponized payload, attack your system on its own automatically, all at machine speed. Now, when you combine that with a quantum computer, it is off the chain, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob.